How you doing?
Good, sir.
All right, we're live on the air.
Wish-
Good to see you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for coming. As you know, I'm Phil Stokes, and I really appreciate you guys showing up on a rainy night tonight for this. I did one last night. It was pretty good. About 20 people out at Toledo Blade at the library at Shannon Staub, and we had a lot of good questions. I took kind of a different approach. I'm not one, I don't think there's a big benefit in doing a presentation and doing a lecture. You guys have learned a little about this or heard a little about it. So you obviously got some questions, concerns. Since there's only, a handful, I'm not gonna, list them. I've got a half a dozen or so concerns that people had last night. And so what I'd like to do is I'll just ask you, start with telling me, if you haven't quite wrapped your head around this or gotten totally comfortable with the idea of giving the city commission the authority to borrow, like, why not? What are some of your concerns? And then we'll talk them through and see if, any of this makes sense. And, you guys have a better picture of why this is, I think, a great ask and a logical.
I've been to a couple commission meetings when it's come up. I've listened to both sides. I just want to come tonight to see what people think about it. And I pretty much made up my mind. I think it has more pros than it does cons. And I just want to get your take on it and look at some of the questions that people have and go from there.
People, what I heard last night from people is, looking at their clients, profits, one, the issue of trust. People always, why should we trust you if we give you this borrowing authority and you don't have to come to us and ask every time you want to borrow or go into debt? Like, why is that a bad thing? Logical question. Are we giving you a blank check? I mean, what does this mean? Can you just borrow money for anything you think we need to do? And, that's another concern. Those were the biggest concerns people had. As I was explaining to this couple here right before the meeting, right now, city commission can raise taxes to cover its obligations. It can increase its fees for public works, for utilities, for fire rescue to cover its needs. And so far, for the past 5 years, we've held our property tax rate flat. And we struggle to keep up because we're seeing our city grow, certainly by population. We're struggling to try to balance our residential tax revenues with our commercial revenues, which is a struggle. Most cities our size should be at 20-25% commercial revenues versus residential. We're at 8 or 9. So the burden on our city falls on the backs of residential taxpayers, which is brutal. And the city struggled to maintain the quality of services. We have the best police, fire rescue, public works services in the area. The county doesn't compare, not to knock anybody else or any other municipality, but our services are top notch. And that's one of the reasons we're the second fastest growing city in America. We have incredible quality of life, 29 parks and rec areas. We afford our citizens beautiful areas to enjoy their lives. And all those things cost money. So, when you look at how do we do what most citizens have asked us to do in the past handful of years, the two biggest things I've heard since I got elected were, why aren't you fixing our infrastructure to keep up with the growth? Our roads need work. We have 3/4 of our population on on septic and wells. We need to get on public water and sewer. We need more water plants to cover the growing population. We need, with 42 water structures that are gone near 50, 60 years old, 90 bridges, we have antiquated infrastructure that needs help. So why aren't you doing this stuff? And the second thing people, and in the surveys we do each year for our budgeting process, amazingly enough, higher than safety is infrastructure, because we are one of the safest cities in this country for our size. It's incredible. Once you get to where you want to be, people tend to look, where else do you need to improve? Infrastructure is the single biggest ask. And then people will say, we want you to be the best stewards of our tax dollars you can possibly be. Makes sense. That's what I want. I'm you. I pay my taxes, whether I'm on this commission or, after I'm off, there's a new crew, I want them to watch my dollars. I don't want them to waste the dollars. So when we look at how we're going to do this, if we were to simply increase taxes to pay for all our infrastructure, it would pretty much fall on the backs of our current taxpayers. It would be disproportionate to those people who have more expensive homes, because even though, like, the tax rate might be the same, your property value's higher, you pay more in dollars. The nicer a property you have, the more you're going to pay into this pot to help pay for this infrastructure. This referendum is about a charter amendment that would allow the city on related issues. There are two types of bondees: general obligation, for which a city pledges its good faith and credit, means any and all revenues of the city can be used to service that debt. The other is revenue bonding, where there is targeted revenues that are dedicated to paying that debt obligation. That's what this is about. General obligation bonds, by law, must go to referendum. Public has to vote on them. Historically, and in 411 other communities in this state, every other community has borrowing ability for revenue bonds. They have some limits, they have rules and guardrails, but they can borrow money for emergencies, for infrastructure, for needs. Our city doesn't. And it goes back to general development, who built our city and put that in the original charter, and it's never changed. Were this asked to be supported by the citizens, it would, first of all, not allow the city commission to use your property taxes at all for any debt it incurred. So property tax is off the table when it comes to using any dollars from your property taxes to service any debt that would be incurred under this charter amendment. Surtax is the second big bucket. We are part of the county surtax, which is a sales tax of a penny, which equates to the city of Northport, based on population, to over $300 million over a 15-year period. We're in surtax 4. 2 years ago, it was just approved. Our projection is somewhere between $300 and $400 million. Concurrent with the citizens voting to approve that surtax renewal was a laundry list of projects, among which was the widening of Price Boulevard in 3 phases, which gobbles up darn near 2/3 of those funds between principal and interest over the next 15 years. So there really isn't a lot of surtax money you can mess with. There's some utility projects in that list. There's some other projects. And morally, the citizens supported that list when they voted for it. So to rape, pillage, and plunder it, kind of not the greatest idea. So more or less, the surtax is another bucket of funds that really don't play a factor in this charter amendment. What's that leave? It leaves the fees we charge for utilities, for public works, for fire rescue. In each of these areas, these district funds, by law, you can't take those funds and dump them in the general fund. You can't take utility revenue from their district or the fire rescue district and use that money to build a park somewhere. It's against the law. They have to be used within their buckets. So if, let's say, utilities has a $50 million budget, and 40 million of it goes to take care of the operations of its department, of providing the services to our citizens. And then there's 10 million set aside for capital acquisition and improvement. That's, in utilities case, okay, or public works, let's say that 10 million goes to pay for 2 water structures, or a water structure and a half a bridge. Water structures, $4 to $6 million. We have 42 ancient ones. So we do 1 or 2 a year. We don't even do 1 bridge a year, maybe. We try. We accumulate the money. So what we want to do here with this referendum is be able to use that $10 million bucket, that $10 million that they have left, that they budget every year. And instead of paying as you go, to say pretty much every year that 10 million is going to be there. And it may grow over the years because population's growing, okay? And we're going to welcome, have a seat, come on in, that's okay. And so, that money could be used to pay interest and principal and allow us to build instead of 1 or 2, go out and contract for 4 or 5, phase them in over a period of years, lock in prices at today's dollars rather than 5 years from now with inflation always costs you a lot more, and be able in an organized fashion accelerate the process of improving our infrastructure and use those revenues year after year to service that debt. Can't ever borrow more than you can afford to pay because there's only so much revenue in those districts to service debt with. So when people say, well, you could just bury us in debt, not really, because, unlike credit card companies that might give you multiple credit cards, the kind of lenders who lend to municipalities are looking a little closer. It's kind of a different world. They're going to make darn sure that on a revenue bond, you've got dedicated funds there and in place to be able to service that debt. So this really is an extremely limited ask. It's a very limited authority as opposed to what the citizens already face with the city. In order for the city to cope with infrastructure need without a tool in the toolbox like this, the only alternative the city really has is to raise user fees and taxes to the point where we accumulate the money to be able to pay for this stuff, or come and ask you and say, we need X 10, 20, 50, 100 million more. We're going to take that money, we're going to go issue bonds, and we're going to use this bucket of money to pay those bonds off to do this infrastructure. But when we do that, where's that money coming from? That general borrowing comes from all our buckets, all of them, if we want to. I would rather see it come just from district fees. It's very limited, it's narrow in scope, it controls the amount of borrowing that the city's allowed to do. And every year, what happens is, when the departments, we spend 6 months putting an annual budget together. Starts with each department putting together their wants and their needs, part of which is a list of their capital projects, part of which will now be what projects they think lend themselves to borrowing. Those will work their way in. Part of this process will be a debt management advisory board that will be set up with citizen participation on the board. Okay, they will make up this board. They will all be credentialed financial people. They will review these projects. They will make recommendations, suggestions, which will then, like many of our other advisory boards, which will find its way back to our finance department. Outside financial consultants that we work with regularly will weigh in, as will our outside bond counsels, to make sure these qualify under our charter and under our regulations. And then it first moves its way to commission, where there'll be public hearings, 2 public meetings, where it'll be open debate under the sunshine, where people will have a chance to weigh in, complain about whether or not they like the projects or don't. And at that point, then this commission will vote to authorize this as part of the budgeting process. And then the funds have to be there in order to pay for it, because we got to, by law, balance our budget every year. So, and year after year, we can't continue to borrow because we need those subsequent year funds to help service whatever debt we're incurring. So there's just not an open-ended borrowing process where every year we'll just do 10 or 15 million of additional borrowing until we're $100 million in debt, because we have no ability to service that debt. So again, I've kind of thrown a lot at you, but that's sort of the approach to this. And I'm curious to hear,
Why not do that? The federal government does that every year.
yeah, and that's why the federal government's bankrupt. But they got one distinct difference from the city of Northport: they can print the money. If we could print the money, we'd be in a whole lot better shape. But we can't. We got to balance our budget every year. And, the way I figure is, as I said before you guys came in, citizens want us to fix the infrastructure, and they want their leadership to be the best stewards of their tax dollars possible. This charter amendment adds a tool in a toolbox that helps us to do that. Otherwise, we're forced to use general tax monies. And I don't know where you live, if you live in Welland Park or if you live in Legacy, Northport. But if you own a nice house, the nicer a house you own, the higher value that house is. The more you're going to end up contributing to this kitty, which I don't think is really fair. We pay our user fees, our district fees, either flat based on, the same amount for every property, or based on property size, or based on usage. But it's a lot fairer than paying twice what someone else pays simply because you got $1 million home and somebody else has a $300,000 home. I don't think that's really fair. And again, it puts the city commissions, not just this one, but future commissions, in a position of leaning on property taxes to help fund our infrastructure, when I'd like to see it be, much more targeted, much more specific to the individual districts. I think it'll keep the burden off us as property tax owners. As the city develops and we increase our non-residential tax base, we'll get a lot more bang for our buck out of the non-residential taxpayers. And I think that's an important thing. As I said, even before you guys came in, our city has less than 10% non-residential tax base. So pretty much the cost of running our city falls on the backs of all its property owners.
Okay, I have a question.
Hopefully I'll have an answer.
This is my second one, listening to the overall agenda. I'm all over what you're doing. However, we're from Indiana. This is our third
I'll
year.
hold that against you. We're all from the left.
Thank God. So the point is, in Indiana, compared to Florida, commercial is based 2% on the tax dollar and 1% for the homeowner. And then you have your exemptions on top of that. Is that exactly the same in Florida, where you gain more on the commercial dollar than you do on the residential dollar?
It's a good question. I don't know that that's the case.
No.
I don't think it's the
You
case.
don't think it's the case?
No.
Oh, my God.
And here's what makes it even worse. The average municipality, the average city our size, maybe not even our size, the average city should have pretty much a 20 to 25% non-residential tax base, because that helps carry things. Northport, when general development built this city way back, it designed it all as quarter-acre plots. I mean, it was all residential. It took years before they even allowed a school to be built, because it was like a place to come buy some swampland and retire in the woods to. People got out of Port Charlotte to come to Northport. And so, as the city's grown, there is no commercial development. We have 8.5% non-residential tax revenue. All the rest 92% of our tax revenue comes from us. And, consumer, like sewer tax kind of money, consumer tax, but that's brutal. It's not sustainable.
But I think
And,
what she's
and
saying
that's my point.
is it's cheaper on the city to have commercial properties than it is residential.
Yes.
Because residential does cost the city more
Yep.
to
And,
pick up
and
and
single
maintain.
And
family.
that's why you reverse it
Yeah, just-
to the commercial
Yep.
becomes the sustaining factor
Yes.
for the infrastructure.
Exactly.
And for everything else you need,
Yep.
the commercial is it.
See, everywhere we have major development going on now, we require our developers to do stormwater management work, bring utilities. So yeah,
Right.
we're getting there. We're getting there, but it's slow. Welland Park's a perfect example of how the developers paid the freight,
Exactly.
which is what we want. But Legacy Northport
There's the
is
developers.
filled with single-family parcels. For every dollar of revenue we get from a single-family property in the city of Northport, in the heart of Northport, it probably costs us $1.25 or more to service them with basic services. It's not sustainable. And there's still tons of single-family properties to get developed. Single-family property owners don't have to do anything about stormwater management. So they put up their house, they put in a driveway, they may put in, God knows what else, a pool, you name it, all impervious land. Where's the water going? Well, it's going everywhere else. Every development, every master plan development, whether it's residential or commercial,
Right.
has to, by law, assure via engineering and supervision by the city that no greater stormwater runoff after development than before. So for people who say, geez, all this development is causing all the flooding that we're seeing, well, we're having worse storms, we're having more storms, but what's really killing us is a lot of the single-family development
No, I,
that we can't do anything about. We can't regulate it, we can't control it, and it's a frustration. So what we try to do in Northport is create more density. First of all, Northport has been pretty affordable, but what's happening now is as prices go up, as values go up, we're finding that a lot of citizens have had to move elsewhere because they can't afford to live here. And there isn't enough diversity in housing types. So you're seeing more and more apartments, townhomes, villas, multifamilies, starter homes. And that does a number of good things for us. While it creates a higher density that some people, get some brain damage over, and I understand that, it also creates densities that attract new businesses, restaurants, and all kinds of economic development,
true.
which is going to help bring more revenues to the city. The best thing are the 3 hospitals. Those 3 hospitals, which we have waited years to bring to the city, while Sarasota Memorial doesn't pay taxes on their hospital, HCA and Welland Park will, as a for-profit hospital. But think of the hundreds of businesses, medical related, that will pop up everywhere. And 90% of our population leaves the city to go to work. We're a young city, average age 48. Put the pressure on our roads and everything else, not to mention the money they spend outside the city of Northport. If we can create an environment where we got good businesses, good jobs, and people can live, work, and play in our city, it's gonna help generate more revenue for our city. It's gonna help balance that tax base and take some heat off us. And so, while we're supposed to be talking about the charter amendment, all of it does fit together in a big piece, because for the development to come, you gotta be able to support it. And people cry with all these new folks and all these new businesses saying the infrastructure support this. We need better roads, we need people on water sewer, we need more water plants, okay? We need to make sure people can traverse the city So our bridges and our water structures need to be healthy. We can't wait till they fail to fix them. People will say, what are you idiots doing? We elect you, you sit there, what do you wait till something breaks before you fix it? It's 60 years old. So, I don't want to do that. I'd like to get ahead of the curve, but how do you do it? This is a pretty narrow ask. It's limited in its scope, it's controllable, its funding sources are controlled, as opposed to having to come out and ask every time we need money. The other thing is, we learned a lot of lessons from Irma. When that hurricane hit, this city was pretty devastated. We had over $60 million worth of debris removal costs.
Irma or Ian?
Ian,
Yes.
sorry.
I do the same
I lived
thing
through
myself.
Irma too.
I do the same thing
I lived through
myself.
Irma too. And, the law requires that a city maintain 20% reserves, which have to be maintained. But years ago, credit to the commissions back in those days, not that far back, decided to create some additional reserves of up to 10%. And they usually hovered in the 4 or 5% range, sometimes 7, 8%. A cushion against having to reach into that 20% reserve, for which if you do, there are some very strict requirements as to how you pay it back. So our city was very frugal and fiscally responsible and built those sustainability funds, those extra reserves, so that when Ian did hit, we were able to literally write checks to pay for that debris removal. That's why Northport got cleaned up so fast, while Fort Myers and Cape Coral and some of the other cities got very, they had to wait for
Fort
money to
Myers.
come, borrowing to go through. Problem is now, we're still waiting on FEMA reimbursements and some insurance. What happens if we get hit again? What happens if we have some infrastructure projects that really need addressing? Where are we gonna find the money? If you have to go through a process of asking the citizens through a referendum, in a year, maybe more, depending on the cycle. General obligation bonding, I believe, requires you to go to the public during a regular election, which is every 2 years. God forbid, we would have to wait to fix, let's say, a major bridge or water structure went out. What would people do? They'd be driving around the city to get where they need to go. They go like, what are these people who we elected doing? Because we wouldn't have the money to do it. And you can't just say, okay, starting next month, you all gotta write us a check. You can't do that. The process is slow. Government moves like molasses. So by the time we were able to facilitate this, we would be in trouble. And worse, after Ian, we learned there were all kinds of federal and state matching monies, revolving loans, all kinds of abilities to borrow and utilize state and federal dollars to help dig out.
You had to.
You had to have it.
You had to have matching funds.
Had to be able to do it. And it croaked us. There were so many opportunities that we couldn't take advantage of. We were very fortunate when the county reached out and applied for a HUD loan for $210 million last year. They got it. And Northport was able to get just in downtown Northport, 15 million, I believe, enough to pay for the Mayacahatchee Bridge, enough to pay for 2 water structures and another project. It set aside 25 million to pay for the other part of River Road and towards Englewood, which we desperately need as an exit for both, all of us in Welland Park as well as Legacy Northport. And so, we were fortunate. They came up, that was found money for us, but you can't count on found money. So we need to do something that helps give us this flexibility. And at a 400, and I hate the argument, well, everybody else has this authority, so we should too. But 411 cities in the state of Florida, and we're the only one that doesn't have borrowing ability to some degree. Venice, they don't even have a cap. We at least put a $15 million cap on the non-emergency related infrastructure
Or
projects.
major project.
Yeah, and that's really what this is all about. It's not about building more parks or aquatic centers or frittering it away on whatever people might think. It's really all about fixing the infrastructure. That's what we need to do this for. And it's pretty darn controlled, because when you think about these district buckets, the funding can really only be spent there. So you're talking fire rescue, you're talking public works, and you're talking utilities. So can't go build a park with this money, can't go fix Mineral Springs with this money, okay? You can't build even a new police headquarters, which some people have been worried we would try to do, because it's a $15 million gap. We're gonna have to go ask you, or find someone to build it and lease it with an option. You know, there's some creative ways to finance that, and we do need it, but, you know, not on our tax dollars, we can help it.
Well, I think it's interesting, you keep saying $15 million, like, and I keep thinking that's a lot of money until you start talking about municipalities, and then it's not that much money.
It's nuts. There's, over the next 15 to 20 years, the city has $1.8 billion
In projects.
projects. Now, a billion of it is water and sewer conversion. The state's mandated. Everybody's got to go to water and sewer. Question is, how long? And for the most part, they're very flexible with regard to affording communities the opportunity to take as much time as they need. But if they don't see communities making a real effort, they can mandate it. They can shut a city down and make life miserable, force taxes through the roof to get this stuff done. We do have a program. We have a 30-year program. And for some areas of our community, it might take that long to get their water and sewer. I would love to see more of it come sooner, because all those hookup fees are gonna generate revenues to help pay this stuff back. And not to mention what it does for our environment. I mean, you know, wells and septic are not good. Okay, people may like them, but the wells suck the water out of the aquifers, which means salt water rises more living in Florida. Wells have to be dug deeper and deeper and deeper to get clear water. Here in Florida, that ain't easy, if possible at all. Septic, we got septic systems, God knows, 2/3 of the houses in the city have septic. They were never regular, God knows how many are leaching, God knows what kind of problems there are out there. So, you know, these changes need to take place. We're not, you know, wasn't that many years ago, we were 15, 20,000 people. We were a sleepy little bedroom community that nobody even paid attention to. And now we're the second fastest growing city in America, and like, we're exploding. And obviously, if we're doing something right, because people love living here, to keep moving here. We're in great position. And so, you know, we can't stop the growth, so we gotta manage it. We gotta do it smart. And we gotta use your dollars, our dollars, responsibly. That's what this ask is all about.
So that, the ask is for the 15 million to be voted upon by the voters to give you this. But how many times a year can you guys get 15 million?
It's,
100?
the ask isn't to be able to borrow 15. What it is to say that for emergencies, for eminent
Right,
infrastructure.
we understand that, but I'm just saying, like, what's the cap on that 15?
Well-
Is it 10 projects or 100 projects?
You know what? What really controls it, we put a $15 million cap on because the county has a $28 million cap. We said, I don't know, what would be a good number? Some commissioners said 20, some said we should have as much as the county. I said, and a couple other commissioners said, well, 15, because I don't think the cap matters at all. I think what matters is how much money each year is available to service debt. It may be, we can't borrow $15 million every single year, year after year after year, because we won't have enough money to pay for all those debts. We might want to spend, let's say, we bid off 4 or 5 water structures and a bridge, and we determined we need to borrow $20 million, for argument's sake. So and it's a series of projects. So they're, even though it's more than 15, they're different projects. So they qualify, they're all under 15. And we look at the revenue that the district has, and we have the ability over 30 years to pay for that borrowing. But that doesn't mean that year 4 or 5, we can go out and borrow another 20 million bucks, because what are we gonna use to pay for it? We're using the revenues to pay for the first 20 we borrowed. So.
Right, but isn't the whole idea of this is to borrow the money to help the city grow? And as the city grows, tax dollars that come into the city help pay it back along with the impact fees, the other fees are. Right. So my question is again, like, did the city determine, like, what they're gonna maximum spend in a year's time at this stage? Like, if something happens next year, are they gonna borrow, 15 million to pay for a cleanup?
There's no way to do that up front, except at the beginning of each budget year. So every year, departments will look at their revenues and how much money is set aside for capital acquisition or debt service, and say, we used to only be able to do one bridge or one water structure, but we could do 2. We have the money to do it, and so that's all we're gonna do. And maybe that's only 8 million, $4 million projects. See, what I'm saying is, rather than focus on the cap, because the caps only matter if you had an unlimited amount of money to pay debt with. Because if you don't have the money to pay the 15 million, then you can't borrow 15 million. And you certainly can't borrow 15 million every year, because you don't have the revenue stream to pay for it. So to answer your question is, you don't know, but each year to look at it. And when you budget year 2, you say, well, okay, here's my operating expenses for my department, for my utilities department. And I got X amount left out of that money. Let's say I got $30 million a year in my budget. 20 of it's, let's say, going to pay the operations, okay, to pay for whatever services that are being provided to our citizens. Then I got 10 million left over. Of that 10 million, 5 million of it's paying the interest and the principal on what we borrowed last year. And I'm gonna have to pay that every single year. So what do I have left? Do I have anything left to borrow with?
No, I understand what you're saying. So, I mean, you do this in basic businesses.
Yeah.
You have operating, you go to the bank and you say, hey, could I have a loan? Even though you don't take it, you have it there. But in business, you look at it and you go, okay, I can take a max of, say, 50,000. It's a completely different animal, business versus city. But you still look at it and you go, okay, I'm gonna borrow possibly 50,000 for whatever, payroll, equipment, blah, blah, blah. But so I'm just asking, did the city set up like, okay, hypothetically, in years 1 to 5, we're assuming we're not gonna borrow more than 15 million 10 times. I mean, you probably have a pretty, I understand what the city does, and I understand how they look at department heads. They're very good planning people, because it takes a long time to get anything done. And I'm pretty sure they know what water control structures need to be finished, what bridges need to be fixed. And that's my only question, because people are coming to me asking me this question. And I said, I don't really know the answers, but I know people that will have the answers. And I think it's a legit question. If we're voting on this as a community, people just want to know, what does it max out at? We don't really care what Around does. We care what the city of Northport does. We understand that the city of Northport has the best fire, best police, because they're dedicated to the city, just like, city staff's very dedicated to the city. But I think it's a legitimate question that people are bringing to me. That's why I bring it to you, because I still haven't been able to figure it out. I don't think that the city would overspend. I really don't. I think they're very responsible at this point of the age and the city government because of past histories. They've been crucified over that. But it is a legit question. It should be pretty black and white, I think, unless, basically we get hit by, 3 Ians in 1 year.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, I'm willing to, it's not like, it says right here, to respond to a declared emergency or disaster for safety or public health projects, up to $15 million per project. That doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna go out on the first day you get this referendum passed, you're gonna go, okay, we got $15 million, let's go borrow the money and start working on shit.
See.
You're gonna be saying, okay, if we need to, we can borrow up to $15 million. We really don't want to, but we only have 10 million, and let's borrow 5 so we get this project done.
None of us want to borrow more money than we got, because obviously it costs us money. To answer your question directly, part of this process, city has directed every city has, well, not every, but we certainly do have outside financial consulting firm that works with our city. They'll guide us financially, help our finance department. We have outside bond counsel as well that advises on any debt process that we go through. When we went out for bonds and did our Price Boulevard widening, our bond counsel weighed in on that and assisted. We've commissioned our outside financial folks to do a set of 5-year projections. One of the biggest challenges we faced in the recent years is with the astronomical growth, is how do you project what you mentioned, which is how do you project the revenue benefits from all the new growth, both residentially and commercially? Because that weighs largely on how we set our tax rates, how we charge for our fees, and also if this gets approved, how much we could borrow and what we could afford to pay for. So the answer to your question is, part of this ongoing process will be an every year rolling 5-year financial plan that projects out our revenues versus our expenses. So as a city as a whole, we can look and see our revenues meeting, surpassing, and to what extent surpassing our expenses. And at what point do we start to see the ability to generate revenues to help pay for some of this stuff? Growth pays for growth, rather than be on the other trajectory, which is we need to mortgage the future a little bit to catch up. And so it's hard to answer your question because you can't just say, we're gonna limit it at, we're not gonna borrow any more than 30 million or 50 million, because we don't know. You won't know, except every year as you sit down and project your revenue streams and you look at each department and you look at what these districts have available. We're not just gonna spend it because we got it.
I'm sure.
Our needs exceed our revenue sources. So for a while, yeah, we have projects that are so backed up, but the truth is we can only borrow what we can afford. So if you wanted to figure it out, you could look at the budget for fiscal 25 and you could say, how much money does Public Works have dedicated to capital assets, to capital improvement projects? Let's say they have 10 million, okay? Let's say Utilities has 30 million. And let's say Fire Rescue has 15 million. Well, how much debt, if we spent it all in 2025, we spent it all. We just blew out 30, 40, $55 million of capital projects. And with that, we incurred $100 million worth of debt. Could this 30, 40, 55 million that comes in every year, how much borrowing could that pay for? Well, if we did that, we wouldn't be able to borrow any more money for 30 years till we paid it off or till our revenues kept increasing in other places. So the answer to your question is that the way this gets approached is not by saying what's the maximum we could borrow and that's what we're going to do. It's more, what do we absolutely need to spend our money on? And what can we afford to borrow? And the idea is to never really ever have to hit a cap. Because why would you? If things softened up, if the economy got a little soft, you know, you want a cushion, you don't want to max yourself out. Unlike many of us who like accumulate credit cards, go into hock, have this belief that we're upwardly mobile and monies will always continue to come in. It's a different world in the world of municipal finance. You just can't do it. Lenders are way more savvy. They just don't throw money at it. They're so conservative. And so it's hard for people to wrap their heads around, well, how could you not know what the maximum amount you're going to borrow is? The idea is, what's the minimum amount we want to borrow? We just want to be able to address our serious infrastructure needs, borrow the absolute barest minimums we need. And if, God forbid, we get socked with an emergency, hopefully we have the wherewithal to utilize all the resources, state and federal, out there to mitigate how much of our money we got to actually use to fix the problem. And so I know I'm not answering, not solving your problem with it, but I'm trying to explain how it's, you don't look at it really from the top down. You don't
It's
look at
not
it
a
from
simple answer, no matter how you do
I
it.
It's
understand
hard
it's
to
not a simple
explain it
answer.
to people. It's hard to explain this to people. It really is.
But if you, okay,
If
I
they
mean-
borrowed $100,000 in the first year, they'd never pay it back. There's just no way they could ever pay that back.
right, I understand that,
So,
and I understand they're trying to spread it out over years, because we're, you know, a 65-year-old city that basically for the past 40 years have been doing one plan, is that building as many houses as you could possibly build in a small section of town with no commercial development behind it until the past 20 years, I would say, you know, is when, you know, Applebee's came, Walmart came, and, you know, where we started getting some commercial. But, you know, the Walnut Park, the Braves, they definitely helped put us on the map, get more development here. Along with, you know, the city does do a lot of advertising about the city, what they have to offer to other people that come down here, which is great. The EDC helps with us to put a spotlight, you know, for the county and us. But, you know, it is when people come to you and they ask you a question, and I'm like, I have no clue, like, because it's never been spoke of. I've been to a lot of these meetings and I've never really heard of, like, are we doing a cap? What's going on? And I understand all about spending money and living within your means and all that kind of stuff. And I commend the city for doing it and not being like a federal government. It's very hard to do and keep the city going. But I do look at two classes of people. I look at the kid that just graduated from college, it's got the station wagon, that wants 2 kids and a wife and a picket fence. I also look at, you know, Miss Betty that's been living out 1 Main Street for 60 years here in Northport, that just lost her husband last year, that now can't afford a double tax increase. You know, you have two classes of people that are really suffering. The up and coming people that are gonna support us, the older people that's been here all these years building everything that we see around here with their tax dollars. You know, and I just look at them saying, okay, if we have to increase the taxes by double, just to keep the city going forward, it's gonna wipe out 2 classes of people.
It's unsustainable.
You're right. So I understand the borrowing thing, but, you know, when people ask me questions about, you know, have you ever heard of a number? I'm like, no, I haven't, but I said, there's a lot of smart people that work in the city.
It's for every project. I mean, a $15 million cap, you think about it, to build a water plant
It's not much.
not much.
No, that's why, you know,
it's not even half, you know? And we're lucky water structures, you know, are 4 to 6 million. Bridges, Miami actually costing us 12, 13, 14 million.
that's a present day cost. I mean,
Yeah,
put another 5 years on it.
there you go.
You know?
That was what we learned from Price Boulevard.
Right.
It should have cost 1/10
Yeah.
of what it's costing us.
Yeah.
Because they just kept kicking the can down the road. Not, I mean, these are not
Well,
easy
the reason they're
solutions.
doing it is because they didn't have the
Yeah, I know.
tools to complete the projects.
That's right.
That's what the city's asking to do, is have the tools to complete the projects.
It's, you know, you know, it's funny, people say, well, you know, we give commissioners this authority, they don't listen to us anyway, they just do whatever they want. You still got the right to get rid of us, you still got the right to vote us out. You gotta have some confidence that, you know, you can't look at the history and say, because the federal government's corrupted, because past commissions are, just look at the last 4 or 5 years of the city of Northport. Not one increase in property tax rate. The city's filled every department with not just good people, but I mean, top-notch, nationally recognized people. The people running the departments in our city are nationally recognized. Elena Ray runs our building department. She was one of the senior people working on the Everglades restorations. I mean, we're talking about people with serious credentials. Nancy Galvani, who's our head of utilities, she took our city water system from literally the 18th century to the 21st century. You go into our water plants and all of you can take tours as citizens. You can get tours for free of the water plants. And let me tell you, it's like walking into NASA. There are walls of screens where quality of water is tested, where pressure is tested. I mean, 10 years ago was like some guy with a beaker, you know. I mean, I'm being silly, but it was almost that. And so you've got a team of people who are leaders in their industries and experts, without a doubt, subject matter experts that are nationally recognized, and they run our city. Us commissioners, you know, well, I have financial background, so that's why you see me sitting here, and I have perhaps a little more different perspective on some of the financial aspects of the city. But the average commissioner, I mean, we're you. We're everyday citizens. We live here, we pay our taxes. We, you know, most of us were retired because hell, on $40,000, you can't sustain a family. So who does this job? $40,000 and we get to get yelled at and accused of being in developers' pockets? What a great deal. I wish I had done this years ago. And, you know, you look at that and you say to yourselves, like, look how easy it was for Northport, you know, in its sleepy days to be in the shape it was. And now you're seeing by necessity, we're being forced to elevate everything we do in our city. And, you know, it does cost money, but you can take some great comfort in that you have a hugely professional group of people who run this city day to day. And they do a really good job of it. They just need the tools to do the best job they can. And that's what we want as commissioners. I don't want my taxes to go up. I want to make darn sure we squeeze the juice out of every buck we have. I also want to make sure that I'm not paying, since I'm 70 years old, actually 72 in a couple of days. Don't tell anybody. Oh, I guess we just told everybody.
It's all over there.
But the reality
It's
is,
on camera.
I don't want to pay all by myself for the next 20 years of benefits that all the people who haven't even thought about living here and businesses haven't thought about living here. And they're all going to reap the benefit of what's coming out of my pocket. I want us all to share that. I want growth to pay for growth. And this is a way to do it. It takes a little bit of trust. It takes a little bit of watching. And I left last night, I had 20 people, and one guy was just wailing on me about, you know, you take our tax dollars, God knows where it goes, you use it here, there, and everywhere. You know, I don't know where this money's going, and now you want us to let you go borrow. And I say, you know, we spend half a year on the budget every year. We had 5 months of budget work and a dozen meetings or more, all public meetings. There was never more than a couple of people in a room, and hardly any people probably going on watching the YouTube videos because they're all available. So you can't say, well, I work, I don't have time. You could learn, and then you could send questions in. You could ask, you could set up appointments with commissioners or staff to ask questions. The budget is this big. Every single dollar of $270 million that it takes to run this city is accounted for. Every dollar is scrutinized. Every dollar that every department asks for is agonized over probably $5, $6, $7 million this year that were on the initial ask list, got chopped because we don't want to raise our property tax rate at all. We knew we had to raise some of our user fees. So we really buttoned down our budget in a tough year. And we we forgave some of the expenditures we probably should have made because we just felt that we needed to tighten our belt as tight as we could. And that's what we do every year. And people don't see it. So they just figure, God, all this money and God knows what you all are doing with it. But it's all going to give us the best city we can give you. And that's why we are one of the best cities in the country. That's why everybody wants to live here. You have a question.
I do. What's entailed on changing the taxation structure for commercial and residential rentals? What's involved? If you all want to make more money, which is exactly what the taxpayers want, so they can reduce their taxation base, and somebody picks it up, what's involved in doing that?
I believe when it comes to tax rates, that's a state thing. State regulates, but we have some flexibility.
Yes, you
We
do.
do when it comes to like impact fees and other developer related fees as people want to build, whether it be residential or commercial. So yeah, we do that. The city, again,
I'm just thinking you might kill two birds with one stone.
we've
All
been
those
trying.
demonstrators that are against commercial might all of a sudden sway a move heavily to the other way, because now they're not gonna get hit
Though,
with that.
we already have. The city, city elected officials are always has to raise costs and fees anywhere.
I'm sure they are.
So they always do that.
Yeah.
The problem is that if you don't keep pace with the market, if you aren't able to look at what it's costing you to provide the services to residents and businesses, and you're not charging adequately for those fees,
Right?
then you get behind the eight ball. And where's it come out of? Our pot of money. So the problem is that for years, the impact fees and user fees way behind. Over the past handful of years, the city has consistently raised those fees up.
Okay.
And we're working with, but there is a seesaw to this. If you push too hard
They start to.
and you charge businesses more than what they would have to pay in other municipalities,
Right.
they'll go there. And that's the danger. We are so desperately in need of economic development that we have done what we can to come close.
You can always escalate gradually.
That's what he's
And
just.
that's what we do.
Okay.
And that's what we do. And we create incentives for businesses to do things,
Which is important.
Yeah, to
And,
get
and
them
I
here.
think that's.
And you give them the deferrals in impact fees and some of the other areas to help incentivize them to come here, make the initial investments to get up and running and going. And then over time, you make your money back. That's the window we're in. We've been loading this system up and we haven't seen it start to really come to
Kick into
fruition.
gear.
So that's why I say, when we see these studies start to come out, and we see projections over the next 5 years and 10 years, and we see what's expected, I mean, with the push we've had for economic development in our city, we should start over the next 5 to 10 years to see huge returns on the investment. But it takes time. What do you do in that window? In between, everybody goes, well, growth should be paying for growth, but yeah, you had to get the growth here. So there was things that were done in order to incentivize, and it takes a little time for the revenues to catch up. And everybody's making investments. And, businesses come here because it makes economic sense for them. We can't always tell which businesses we want to come. Like people say, why they got so many car washes? Why they got so many mini storages? Well, first of all, you can't say, we're only gonna allow 20, and at 20, we cut it off. It's against the law. If the zoning says you can build there, you gotta allow the free system to work. What business would build another mini storage if it didn't need it? I mean, why do you have a McDonald's across the street from a Burger King? Because they feed off each other, and they found that it actually financially viable for them to do it. So who's the city to tell them you shouldn't? But to get some of the attractive businesses and opportunities here, you gotta have density. You gotta do a lot of things to make yourself attractive. We want desperately businesses who bring high-paid jobs to come to our city. How do we do that? You know, yeah, you know, you gotta, so you know, when we're building all these apartments, we're building all these condos, and people are going, what the heck are you doing to our little single-family home development? Well, the reason is, we need that density. You know, the hospital put off coming in for years because they didn't figure we got enough people. We didn't need it. Let them go to Sarasota, let them go to Englewood, wherever, you know? Now, they can't ignore us. We're just so big. We are nobody's redheaded stepchild. We are the biggest city in this county of Sarasota. We are on the national map, and we continue to grow, and everybody has to start paying attention to us. So all of a sudden, we're seeing all kinds of great opportunity. But we're in that window of, you know, that painful growth. And so to get back to, this is, I think, a narrow ask, a reasonable ask, and hopefully people will see their way to giving us that opportunity. Because alternatively, I don't want to have to go out and we can't just kick the can on the infrastructure. We've got to fix some of it. And if we fix it, it'll be more expensive and it'll take longer if we do it the traditional way. And this is a better way to do it. Really isn't about, or shouldn't be about, trusting public officials, elected officials with authority to borrow money. Because we can always raise taxes. It's a crazy thing. If we were irresponsible, we would just raise taxes to the levels we needed to pay for what it is we thought we needed.
Do you have
That's not
any
a smart
idea
thing to do.
how we're doing on that needle mark from people against to people for?
I wish I knew.
I
I gotta tell
well,
you,
me too.
if I could get in front of 90, well, let's say there's 60,000 registered voters in the city of Northport. If you, that's right, and I had 18 last night. And so I'm making progress. If all you guys go out and tell 3 of your neighbors and they tell 3 of their neighbors, by November, maybe we'll get close. There you go. And, you know, I wished I could get in front of everybody and talk like this, because I think there's some value. You can't deny the fact, as much as I don't want it to be, it always is a matter of trusting your elected officials to do the right thing. And even on this local level, it's so bloody hard for, it's not a part-time job, not for me. I pretty much spend full-time at it, but you all are working, doing things, going places. How many people really want to spend a whole lot of their time wondering and worrying about what that goes on in their cities? God bless you for caring enough to come out of here today. But most people don't. Like I said, hardly anybody shows up for the budget meetings. You know what they do? When something's reaching in their pocket or something affects their house, like the people that were upset over Mineral Springs and what we're gonna do there. We have people going crazy when we're rezoning the city, right? Fixing the ULDC, people come out of the woodwork because it affected them or they believed it did. But average people, it's like, I got better things to do. I elect you guys, I vote, sometimes I just vote for the first person on. Sometimes I just ask somebody who I should vote for. I don't know you guys. And then you should take care of shit. And then until something goes wrong, then it's like, what? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's real hard to know. You gotta extend a little bit of trust and then look at the results. And, you know, what have you done? You know, anybody could say good stuff and, you know, some people are better talkers than others. The bottom line is you to look at what have you done over the last couple of years? You know, you've been in office 2 years. What have you done? What do you stand
Done
for?
for me.
Yeah.
No, not what
Well,
what
that's
you
what a
done
lot
for
of
me.
people say. And, you know, sometimes people don't even realize what we do for them, you know, because
They don't.
they don't, you know, it's hard to grasp this. And, you know, if people were that involved, that caring, they would probably, you know, run for office or get involved. So, you know, we really try to do the best we can. We are you. We are no different than you, and we have the same vested interests.
There's a logical, reasonable argument here.
Uh-oh. Don't insert logic into this.
Well, I mean, if you're gonna look at it, you gotta look at all points and, there's a logical argument for, the ability to do this. You're not trying to sell me a bad used car. I don't think you're selling me a lemon.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that.
He turned red on that. He was worried.
Yeah, you know, it is tough. I talk to people all the time who just have such little faith, and it isn't without good reason. I mean, you look at government nationally, state levels, you know, the local level is where people can get face to face with the people they elect. So we sometimes, you know, bear the burden of what goes on around the country and around the world. And it is not an easy thing to do. You know, it's a frustration because, you know, when you get this close, this local, there really isn't politics. There isn't red and blue. There isn't any of that. It's like, we're you, so what can we do to make our lives the best they can be, cost us the least, allow us the most freedoms? That's what we all want. We want our families to be happy. We don't want to have to worry how we're paying our bills. We want our city clean and safe and amenities that we can use and enjoy. I mean, we got some pretty basic stuff. And that's why local politics is great. Politics is miserable. Public service is fantastic. And at the local level, it's the best.
Not that there's anything against used car salesmen. I drive a used car.
So when are we gonna get a decent restaurant in this town?
I don't know, which do you want?
Have you been to Anna Maria?
Yeah, I don't know.
But that's the best we have. But it's a
No,
good restaurant. It's a good restaurant.
it's a good restaurant,
But-
yet you're taking it to a
Good killer.
should.
I mean, you go down to, you know, go to, what's that, St. Armand Circle, they got 7 or 8 restaurants.
We ain't St. Armand's.
Yeah.
That, but why
No, I
can't we
get
have
it.
at least one restaurant that could, in that suburb?
You know what I found is that communities like ours and like Port Charlotte have developed wonderful, wonderful ethnic restaurants.
They have.
You don't see some of the name brand. Again, it comes to densities. When you look at some of the big chain restaurants that are high end, okay, the fancy steak places.
Ruth
some of the-
Chris or something.
Yeah, the Ruth Chris of the world, to get them to come to certain places, they are really looking at numbers. It's like the discussions we have with Detweiler's is a good example. Detweiler's is very seriously looking at the Toledo Glade area because finally, the
Really?
densities are so great and what they see happening,
That would be.
okay?
CVS.
You wouldn't have never seen a Costco were it not for the
Density.
density and the
Yeah.
Welland Park development, because they see that. But the great thing about smaller communities and cities is the ethnic flares. That I could name, I mean, if you give me a little time and my tablet or my cell phone, I could list dozens of ethnic restaurants of all sorts between Port Charlotte and Northport that are killer.
Yeah.
Absolutely top-notch, great restaurants, little holes in the wall on strip centers and everywhere. They are wonderful. Some of them started out as food trucks and have done some brick and mortar. Some still do both. They're incredible. Welland Park started to throw in some nice, I mean, with Villani's and the Banyan House. But who are they? Look at the Banyan House and Aquapaza. Who are those people? They're Boca Lupa, and they're the Donato family from Northport.
Yeah.
So, you know, you see this stuff growing. Good example is the Mexican restaurants, you know, Blue Tequila and Pineapple Tequila and Pink Tequila. It's a local family that's
Yeah.
grown this business. And you're gonna see more of it come until every once in a while you'll see like, you know, a Benderson who's doing a strip center will all of a sudden bring in a chain restaurant. You get it from Welland Park because the rents are so bloody expensive. Who could be here? But they're looking at the demographics and they're saying, oh, these rich people in Welland Park, man, we could spend $30, $40 an entree. So here's Villani's and Banyan House. The average Northport person is like, yeah, on an anniversary, a special occasion. But, you know, we need some good middle range business, and they're coming.
Yeah.
They're coming.
I heard Banyan House is not that good anyhow, so.
I don't know. I have friends who love the Bangor House. I'm kind of more partial to Villani's. I like the Oak and Stone. Now, theirs are more reasonably priced. It's a fun place to go. You know, yeah, it's not as, you know, as the Bangor House, but, you know, I got a few friends that are that way, and they like it there. So they go for cocktail
We all
hour,
have
and they eat their,
friends.
and they eat their appetizers at happy hour, so it's cheaper, and they drink,
Yeah.
you know, which is cool. So it's,
Thank you so much for your time.
listen, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys coming out here. And, you know, ask people, I'm gonna be the first of, let's see, 1st of October, I'm at Shannon Staub again, 6 to 7. And then the day after, on the 2nd, I'm back here. It's a Wednesday night, 6 to 7. And then I'm back here again on the 26th of October, right now, early voting, a little before, from 11 a.m. to noon on a Saturday. So tell people if this, you know, I'm sure when you're enjoying your neighbors, you're gonna be talking about our referendum. You know, mention it to people if they have concerns, if as they see signage, as they see things in the paper about it, you know, and they question it. Tell them to come here. Tell them to reach out to me. All they gotta do is go on the city website, they can find my email and my phone number, and I'm happy. I'll meet with them one-on-one. I'll talk to them on the phone. Because the more people that have a chance to talk with us and get a comfort level for who we are, what we're thinking, where we're coming from, probably the easier it is for people to have a little more trust and a little more confidence in this ask. So,
I
thank you
agree.
very much.
If you don't believe them, you can come out and see the city. They have, talks around the city. It's called United Tour.
Yeah.
And, yeah,
Not only that, but you can share it. It's on WKGW Radio, Facebook page, and it's on Real Talk Facebook page.
I do have another question.
Yes.
We have wonderful plantings in all of these new places.
Yeah.
Who's responsible for watering them? Because I remember, because,
This
Grandpa
time of year.
Lisa, we had a whole thing with the water.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Too much.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time.
And good meeting you. At GPZ, you're still, the irrigation is still association related. You're in a single family house?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the community at large irrigates, okay, and in your dues, you're paying for that.
Yeah.
But all of these over by.
She's talking like with the new
On
traffic
the-
circles by
on
council.
41.
Those companies, the way it works is the WVID has what they call, each community has a unit number, but the water is aggregated in what they call Unit 6. Everybody except for Island Walk, because they have their own water system, all of us, the rest of us, from Wisteria to you name it, to you guys, to Renaissance Store, we all pay into Unit 6. And those dollars pay for the irrigation. And we each have allocations that Swift Mud, South Florida Water Management has determined each community should have. And that's how the district doles out your water, all of our water. We just in Wisteria, we have 155 units. Because we're new and we're still under construction, we've been just using water left and right. Lazinski called me, what are you doing over there? And he's in Solstice right next to
Yeah,
me.
because I see all of
And they-
these palm trees and all, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, who's paying for this
Well,
watering of these
they
things?
pay, actually, what happens is, the district, we've been arguing with them that they should sort of identify what their own costs are. What they do is they collect their revenues, and then whatever revenues, whatever water usage is left over after all the communities' water uses, it's their water uses. They kind of back into their number. And so you could see how much they use, but basically they're still developer subsidized. There's probably $30 million that Manamis got sunk into the water infrastructure. They haven't been paid back for. So the litigation that's going on over irrigation, John tried to make an argument that the well availability fees that we were paying at GP weren't fair because only 20% of the time are the wells tapped. Well, the developer has the water and mineral rights. While we owned the land in GP, they had a permanent easement. So he said, well, it's not, why every month we're getting billed for that? Why should we have to pay that? Well, the problem is that that only represents not even 20% of the water requirement GP has. Most of it's coming from water that's getting pumped everywhere throughout throughout West Villages. And what's collected, the well water is so salinated that it has to be mixed. The rainwater has to be mixed. And so without being part of the whole network, it would be impossible. No community's forced to be part of it. So the districts said to Victor and to the gang over there, if you don't want to be part of it, you could be like Island Walk. We could cut you loose. You could pay your own water. Of course, you're gonna have to buy the pumping system. You're gonna have to figure out how you're gonna mix it. You're gonna have to go get your Swift Mud permit to have water. But you could do that. We'll help you do that if you want. But they don't really want to do that. They just don't want to pay. John jumped the gun. He really did when he went after the district over this, because it doesn't make any sense. What we're paying for water is right in the middle. If you were to look at the entire state of Florida and map out the costs of district water throughout the state, our costs are right in the middle. They're not exceptional. They weren't too much. And while the agreements allowed the district to raise the water rates 5% a year, in 7 years, they raised them twice. We were so under market because
Yeah, well,
Well,
I
let's,
just
we're
went to
going to that meeting.
Because they're raising it.
Despite.
And they said, and they admitted, we
crazy.
should have been raising this
Yeah.
all along.
It was crazy. So I say, they should have left sleeping dogs lie. John Wisinski doesn't want to overcharge any of these people, but it's crazy. Are you bitter?
Yeah.
Oh, grief. But that's law.
It's a good
I'm in
conversation.
the witness protection program.
Oh,
That's what all need to be. After those guys.
I just need another one to give this to somebody who couldn't come tonight.
But,
I didn't realize.
yeah, anytime you have more questions, anytime,
Thank you.